We're joined today by Brian Lee Crowley, the Managing Director of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and today we're talking about a new decree from Ottawa that public servants must be in the office at least 3 days a week. This has not gone over well with the unions. They've promised us a summer of discontent here in Ottawa. And Brian, I'm curious, how do you think private sector Canadians, people who work in the private sector, are feeling about this right now?
Well, I always think a story tells us better than anything. My wife is part of a new walking group out in the community where we live. And so she went for a walk with a new group of people she'd never met before, and two of them were civil servants. And during the walk, they started talking about how COVID had been the best thing that had ever happened to them. They got to work from home, and they could go and walk their dog or play with their kids, and everything. They kept their salaries, everything remained as it was. But there was another woman in the group who listened to this for a few minutes, and finally she just stopped dead, and she said, my husband and I lost our business because of the COVID lockdown. Yeah. We went into debt, we lost everything. And I just can't listen to this anymore. Yeah. And I think there is a lot of truth in that little vignette about how people outside the civil service regard what's happening inside the civil service. They feel that civil servants live in a bubble that's completely divorced from reality, that the idea that civil servants would, like several years after the end of the pandemic, be saying, oh, there's no reason for us to return to the office, when private sector workers are, by and large, all back to the office. I know quite well the guy who's a CEO of a manufacturing company, and he's got 25,000 employees. They're all back at work 5 days a week, because if you're making something, you gotta be there. Yeah. You can't do that over the phone from home. Yeah. And so, part of what's going on is there's this psychology in the civil service that, well, everybody's circumstances must be like ours. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is that most people's circumstances are not like people who work in the civil service. You can't phone in your work. If you work in a restaurant or a factory or any of these things, you gotta be there. Yeah. And so even if from some theoretical point of view, much of the work can be done remotely by civil servants, the fact of the matter is that most Canadians cannot do their work that way, and they feel that civil servants are being given privileges that are not available to the average Canadian, and that makes them very angry.
Yeah, I noticed a really stark class divide during the pandemic when, there was people who had to actually go to their jobs, and I had a daughter in kindergarten, and there was a real divide there between the two groups. I wonder, even in knowledge work where it's pretty well accepted that you can do your job from home, I feel like there's a little bit of skepticism creeping in now that the productivity isn't what we first thought it might be in the beginning of the pandemic. Do you feel that way?
Completely. I'm the head of an institute, so I have to think about not only the individual happiness of my employees, some of them might like to be working from home, but I also have to think about what we're trying to achieve collectively. If we're trying to build a team in which we know each other, know our strengths and weaknesses, support each other, build a sense of achieving something together, if people never clap eyes on each other, that's extremely hard to do. Yeah. Now, I have some people who work remotely in the sense that they're in other cities. They're not here in Ottawa. That's a benefit that technology makes possible. But I think that there's actually quite a lot of evidence emerging from lots of research that's been done on this, that kind of full-time work from home, where people never go to the office, never meet each other, never talk, and never engage in water cooler talk and all that kind of stuff that builds relationships, that this does affect productivity. It affects, their awareness of being part of a team. There's less ability for managers to satisfy themselves that the work is being done. Yeah. I think there's a lot now of resistance from from employers to the idea that, oh, well, homework is just the same as being in the office, because it's not.
Yeah, yeah. I think the last thing to touch on here is, Pierre Poilievre has promised to fix the budget. He stopped promising to balance the budget, which I think is notable. But I do wonder if maybe the public service reaction to this, has it made them more susceptible to cuts if people get, in general, more skeptical of what they're doing?
Yes, I mean, motivation matters. You don't want governments to be taking revenge on civil servants. But there is no doubt that when a government is considering how to balance the budget, or even just to kind of reduce borrowing, you think about Paul Martin and the Chrétien government and all the effort that they went to fix our budgetary problems. The size of the civil service was one of the first things that they focused on. And indeed, we went through a reduction in the size of government that was unprecedented in the Western world in the post-war period, in large part by saying, there are certain things that we just don't need civil servants to do anymore. There is, in my mind, no doubt that the way the civil service is behaving over this homework issue is creating a sense amongst Canadians that if there is an effort to fix the large-scale borrowing that Canada is doing, if we have to examine whether we have too many civil servants, people will be okay with that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm sure we'll talk about this again. The summer of discontent hasn't even started yet, so I'm sure it'll be on the radar. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you again.